pleasant good morning to everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's event. We welcome you to the Ministry of Communication, Works, Labor, and Energy's Symposium and Car Show. Today's event is our climax for Energy and ICT Month 2022, and as usual, when we begin these proceedings, we always like to start off with a word of prayer. So I'll invite Mr. Glenroy Foster to lead us in prayer today.
Let's pray. Dear kind and Heavenly Father, I thank you for giving us the strength and the ability to be here today. I thank you for the presenters, the organizers, the media, and all persons that were instrumental in the putting on of today's activities. I ask you to bless the presenters at our symposium so that they can enlighten us with the knowledge and gifts that they have so that we can better ourselves in terms of both ICT and energy. I'd like to thank you and bless the owners of the cars that will be part of the show so that we can see what is possible as we transition from fossil fuel-based vehicles to EV-based vehicles. I also like to thank you for the month of activities that we would have had for both ICT and energy as we celebrate and educate the population of Montserrat on these two initiatives so we can continue to improve and carry ourselves higher and higher in the world standards. So once again, bless all of us here today. Strengthen us and help that we have a good proceeding. All this we ask in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foster, for that word of prayer. All right. Once again, thank you and welcome to everyone for joining us for today's event. We are coming to you live from the Braids Arts and Education Center. My name is Shal Chapin, and I am the ICT officer within the Ministry of Communication, Works, Labor, and Energy. I have been given the task to welcome each and every one of you to today's proceedings. We are pleased and delighted to inform you that the MCWLE this year celebrated Energy and ICT Month 2022 during the month of November under the theme Transforming Our Future Through Energy and ICT. To this end, the Energy and ICT units hosted a range of activities and events to mark this prestigious occasion. The month of celebration was of high importance as it was seen as a prime opportunity to encourage and foster energy awareness and ICT adoption here in Montserrat through various initiatives. Today's event brings the month to a climax. The Symposium and Electric Car Show, plus prize giving and closing ceremony, taking place today is an open invitation to all. The symposium will include a feature presentation, a display station, the panel discussion, and an electric and hybrid vehicle showcase that is taking place on the outside. A prize giving and closing ceremony will take place for the winners from the month of activities. The symposium, an entirely new event on our calendar this year. The aim of this is to expose the public to renewable energy technology that can be beneficial to them and the island of Montserrat. Today's event is a joint event, or rather a collaboration between the two departments of Energy and ICT in conjunction with the Rotary Club of Montserrat. The main highlight of today's event is our panel discussion. The discussions today will be centered around the following topics for our energy panelists: technologies required for future energy development on island, possible future power production arrangements, the future of distributed energy on island, the future of Montserrat's transportation sector, and the future collaborations between energy and ICT. And for our ICT panelist side of things, we have the importance of educating persons and the public about the transition and the future of ICT on Montserrat, the ways to improve Montserrat forward into the digital world, and ways we can build on the current infrastructure to achieve our technological goals. Some of these topics would have been brought to you, but they can no doubt add to the info communication technologies that are ever present in today's living and the ability of our people to function daily in this modern and rapidly shifting society. Once again, we invite everyone to drop in here at us at the Braids and Arts Education Center. come and be informed about the current and future things of all things energy and ICT related with regards to Montserrat. Heading right into our next item on the program, it is without further ado that I introduce here to everyone currently here on premises and listening to us live via Facebook or radio ways, our chairman for today's proceedings, the Director of Energy within the Ministry of Communication, Works, Labor and Energy, Mr. Kenrick Burke.
Thank you very much, Shialsha. Good morning to everyone. As Shialsha would have indicated earlier, this particular symposium is a culmination of the activities that we have had for the month. And we have quite a few things that we want the public to know about ICT and energy in today's program. But before we get into those activities, we also want to show the link as well between energy and ICT and other sectors of the economy. So we're going to first start off with a presentation by Mr. Kevin Crooks, Agriculture Development Specialist. So he's going to present on some of the activities and work that he's working on to show also the linkage between energy and agriculture. So without further ado, Mr. Crooks.
Okay, so morning. Yeah, so I'm Kevin Crooks. I've been here for about 6 months as the new agriculture development specialist. So here for about 2 years. So going to be one of the things I'm going to be looking at is energy, in particular how it affects agriculture. Sometimes, often people don't see the linkage, as well as ICT as well, and they're all integrated in this new era of agriculture. Yeah. So we're going to look at a few different areas. So we're going to look at animal production, so looking at poultry, small stock, so things like small ruminants, sheep and goats, large livestock, cattle. Looking at irrigation, so open field, and then you have controlled environments, which are greenhouses, which also includes things like hydroponics, and which is water-based agriculture, soilless agriculture, and aeroponics, which is agriculture wherein you're in a controlled environment and you're not actually in soil or water, but the soils are actually the nutrients are supplied through like a mist with nutrients integrated into them. And then we're going to look at processing and then aquaponics as well, which is the integration of fish and production of crops. Next. So energy economics. So when we look at energy and agriculture, primary thing we're looking at is the cost per watt as it relates to the total cost per production unit. Meaning, so you have 1 watt energy, and then you have, say, for example, a chicken. So how much does it cost to actually, the input cost for that 1 chicken, right? So the significance is dependent on the prominence of energy within the production system. So, for example, a hatchery, which is very much energy intensive, as a lot of energy is used for incubators, as compared to a cattle farm where it's open field and there isn't really much energy use in cattle until you get to the processing side. So energy, the available energy is a very important part of selecting the type of operation. So when I say operation, I mean exactly like a hatchery, cattle farm, greenhouse, and so on. So within that, you have to look at the difference between capital and operational costs. So capital costs are those first costs that you incur that will be used throughout the lifetime of the operation. And operational costs are your regular costs that you incur. So one way to look at it is saying like independent solar system, right? Which has a high capital cost, so you have to spend a lot of money first, but there's negligible operational cost, right? And then you have the use of grid power, which has negligible capital costs as you're simply just linking into the grid, but has high operational costs as when you're using grid power, you're paying on a regular basis for its use, as opposed to solar, hold on, go back. As opposed to solar power that uses just, one big capital outlay, and then it's, minimal maintenance costs after that. So in this particular environment in Montserrat, actually, what the best thing to do is have an operation that would have a high capital cost in terms of energy, since the grid power here is quite expensive. So we'll be looking at things like greenhouses and aquaponics. You can move on. So looking into animal production, so these are some of the things wherein energy are linked into animal production. So things like automatic waters, electric fencing, automatic feeders, gate systems, and what they call hydroponic fodder production. Next. So here is how you can see the use of solar panels with automatic waters. So this is showing a pump that is powered by the solar panels to bring water to the cattle. And within this system, you can also have timers, which also helps reduce the amount of energy that's used, as it's only pumped when the tank level reaches a certain level. And here you have electric fencing, where you use solar panels for the chargers that put the electricity through the fencing. And then here you have automatic feeders, wherein the feeder motor, which actually disperses the feed within the feeder, is powered by solar. And here you have an automatic gate powered by a solar power. Then you have this interesting thing called a hydroponic production system, which is when you're growing fodder or forages indoors in an intensive environment, and it would require solar panels to help keep the costs down, operational costs. So when we look at particularly energy efficiency, there's a number of things that are actually connected to ICT and agriculture. So we have IoT, so the Internet of Things. So there's a number of things here that can be monitored by what we call bolus monitoring, which is where a sensor is placed within a plastic capsule, and it's put into the cattle by orally, and then it stays within one of the stomachs, because they have multiple stomachs, and it stays there for 5-6 years, basically the life of the cattle. So this measures things like temperature, which can indicate things with illness and breeding, and movement, which can indicate things about illness and nutrient uptake. And then from that, we also have production data management, which can take all this data and it can make estimations through learning in the actual software, so you know the best practices to use for your cattle. And all these things help with energy efficiency. As if you have, say, for example, a certain level of feed, and it takes using a tractor to transport that feed. If you know exactly how much is needed in order to meet the yield that you want for your cattle, then at that point, you don't have to use as much energy for your tractor. Moving on. So this is just a little diagram here. So this little capsule here is the bolus that goes inside the stomach or rumen, and then this information is then broadcast to a gateway wherein it's connected to mobile devices and laptops and so on. Then you have irrigation here. So you have open field irrigation where you have things like solar water pumps, timers. You have agronomic sensors. So these are things like measuring rain, soil moisture, evapotranspiration, which is just how much water moisture goes back into the sky and how quickly it does. And then things like weather forecasting and learning from those sensors. You can go. So this is just an example of a solar pump. The other pump you're powered by the solar panel. And then here you have a suite of sensors which are then linked to a mobile app wherein you can track all the information I just noted before, things regarding precipitation, soil moisture, and so on. And then you can use this to determine how you're actually going to irrigate your field, how much energy to use to irrigate your field, as it takes energy. So then you have controlled environments, things like aquaponics, hydroponics, aeroponics. So these can use solar timers and solar pumps as well, and it's basically the same as the picture I showed before. You can go ahead and move forward. So this is just an illustration of how this would work within a controlled environment. So you have your greenhouse, shade house, what have you here. Then you have a suite of sensors that are within the greenhouse, powered by solar, and then this data is sent to either a cloud-based system or a local server, wherein that data can then be sent to mobile apps and things where you can get alerts about what data the sensors are actually collecting. And then energy efficiency, so monitoring of nutrient uptake and water uptake. So all these things take pumps. So if you know exactly what's needed for the plants, then less energy will be used, as you will just use exactly what's needed for production. And this can be optimized even further through machine learning. So this is just an example of a smart irrigation system wherein you have temperature sensors, soil sensors, and so on that communicate with a central system that does all the analytical work for the operation. Now you have agro-processing. So for agro-processing, we're specifically going to be looking at crops. So you have a solar-powered facility, you have solar drying. So you can do solar drying in two ways. You can do it either through power from a solar panel or through thermal concentration, which is essentially where water is heated from the sun and concentrated within that particular unit. And then you have solar-powered chillers. Can go ahead. So this is an example of a powered solar dryer. You can see the solar powered there. So we'll have a dehydration unit in it that actually dehydrates the material. This is a solar dryer without actual panel here. Then this is a chiller, which uses a solar panel. And then here you have the thermal concentration, wherein you have these collectors here that are heated by the sun, and then that gives you hot water for processing. So now animal processing for meat, same. You have solar panel facilities and solar drying using the same way, and solar powered chillers. Another thing is, particularly if you're processing swine, pigs, using solar thermal concentrators can really reduce your energy costs, as you need a lot of water in order to take off the hair from the pig skin. And then with leather as well, if you're making leather, you can use solar drying as well. So with all these things, same Internet of Things system where you can use moisture, temperature sensors, and so on. Now biogas, so any waste from these operations, they can actually be disposed in a tank wherein it breaks down over time. And this gas, methane gas, can then be used for various equipment within your operation. You can go on. So this is just an example of a biogas reactor. So you dump the waste material in, it breaks down. On top of the material, the gas rises to the top, and then that is then taken out into a biogas container, and then you can use that as energy. Then you have aquaponics here. So one thing you have here, one type of system is something called a recirculation aquaculture system. So this is just a way to essentially take an aquaculture system and filter the waste from it, and then you can use it to do fertilizing of either your open field or your greenhouse operation. And this, again, uses various sensors for temperature and oxygenation, which are controlled by pumps. So if you can reduce the amount of energy through automatic sensors, then you can reduce the energy usage. So this is just an example of a system. So here's the recirculation aquaponic system, and then here's an example of that then feeding a greenhouse for food production. And then you also have tank aquaponics. We actually have an example over there in Braids between the Works, Energy and Works, and Braids Primary School, where you actually grow the crops on top of a tank. So the nutrients come from the excrement from those fish. And next slide. And again, you can use sensors, and this all can be controlled through mobile applications. Then you have agrivoltaics, which is something that's developing now, wherein you have solar panels on stands, wherein you can have livestock under them, and you can have crops under them, and they're quite tall, so even heavy machinery can go under them. You can also use them for charging electric tractors, which are quite new. I think 2 companies are releasing electric tractors, I think, next year. And it can power overall operations, and can even power your home if the farm is on, if your home is on the farm. And you can sell power back to the grid as well. So this is just example. So this is an electric tractor by a company called Monarch. Agrivoltaics using in livestock production, and then these are very tall agrivoltaics wherein you have large machinery like combines and so forth that can travel underneath for production. One of the things in terms of Montserrat for energy, and what's particular here is the use of geothermal direct heat, potentially. So this is something where you use a heat exchanger that can power agro-processing equipment such as dryers, chillers, and processing equipment. Only takes less than a year to build and less than a $2 million spend, which is much lower than the 20-odd million that takes for a power plant. And this could also be used for what they call co-packing, which is where you have third parties that you collectively, I guess, bring in their goods for packing, and then you can distribute it also for third-party processing. So this can be another revenue stream through that. So this is just a little diagram. So you have a geothermal plant, and here the heat is going to, say, aquaculture and so on, processing for heating and cooling. Okay, that's it. Thank you for your time. That's my contact information if you're interested in further information. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Crooks. Does anyone have any question that they would like to ask based on the presentation that was given? Sure.
This is a very basic question. What's the use case for greenhouses in the Caribbean? Because I kind of always think of them as in temperate countries where it's cold. You need them.
You're saying the use of greenhouses in temperate countries?
No. Like, what's the use case in the? Is there a use case in the Caribbean for greenhouses?
Oh yeah, definitely. There's one great example is in Tobago. They're setting up and Jamaica. They're setting up massive greenhouses, and they're going to be solar powered as well. And it's particularly good for the Caribbean because of hurricanes. So, as you know, when you have, during the hurricane season, there's massive crop damage in a lot of countries. So if we can put them in hurricane-resistant greenhouses, that can really protect our food supply and enable those producers to, get their products out there so they can run their business.
Okay. Mainly in terms of physical protection rather than like temperature.
In terms of
is the main benefit is physical protection.
It's physical protection.
Okay.
That's the primary benefit.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She has a. Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Quite enlightening presentation. It shows that energy can be used and ICT can be used to support various sectors. I mean, energy is seen as a cross-cutting theme when you're looking at the different sectors of our economy. And Kevin's presentation would have shown how ICT is linked in terms of trying to improve efficiency and yields in relation to agriculture, and also how energy can actually support it locally. He would have spoke about the connection in relation to the geothermal and direct heat for drying and for providing for processing plants as well too for agriculture. All right. So next we're gonna move on to remarks from the chairman. The remarks today is just really gonna give an update of the activities that is taking place within the energy department, and just to provide an update on some of the projects that we are currently working on as we try to achieve the government's mandate of 100% electricity generation from a new renewable energy source by 2030. And so we have started to work towards achieving that goal, and there are several projects that we currently have in the pipeline that is aimed at achieving this goal. Before we look at renewable energy, when we speak of energy itself, I think that's what most persons think of when you think of energy. You think of solar, wind, and geothermal. But we must first talk about conservation and energy efficiency. You can think of the management of energy like the Maslow hierarchy, where the first need or the first step towards energy security must be to maximize the use of the energy that you're currently consuming. So it must be the implementation of conservation strategies and energy efficiency strategies before you look at renewable energy systems. What that does, it reduces the expenditure that you require to actually implement the required size of renewable energy system that you need at that stage. So that's why we have embarked on 2 projects which are funded by EU. These are 2 projects within the resin bid. Just early this week, there was a supplemental read approved for the addition of funds in relation to these 2 projects. The first project is an energy efficient lighting and environmentally friendly lighting disposal on Montserrat. What that project is going to do is that we're going to replace inefficient lighting, whether it's incandescent or CFL lamps, and replacing them with LEDs in a residential home. We hope to reach out to as much as 1,200 homes. So far, registration, we have had, I think, upwards of 350 persons thus far. So we are a distance away from where we are trying to go. So I'm encouraging persons to register. You just have to reach out to the Energy Department. You can email carto@gov.ms. Anyway. And we will add you to the growing list of participants for that particular project. Besides the bulb exchange, there's another important aspect to that project. We are also looking at the environmentally friendly disposal of those lamps. Typically, lamps are just basically thrown into the landfill at the moment, but some of these lamps have mercury content in it. So what we're going to do, we are also importing a bulb crusher that separates the mercury from the glass itself, and we will be properly disposing of that mercury. And the glass as well, too, will be given to Eco Montserrat for reuse and recycling. Additionally, with that project, we are also looking for the adaptation of standards in relation to light bulbs that is imported into the island. Not all light bulbs are created equally, and as such, we need to ensure that the standards of lamps that we have on the island are sufficiently good enough to ensure that customers get value for what they have purchased. So that is something that we are looking at in relation to this project. The second project is called the post-COVID cost reduction through energy efficiency. This project is geared at the public sector. What we're aiming to do is to improve the efficiency of public sector buildings. We'll be conducting energy audits in these buildings for 10 buildings, and the audits will give us recommendations of how we can actually improve the energy efficiency within these buildings. And the second component of that is that we will actually do the energy retrofits. So if, for instance, the energy audit is saying that we can improve on the air conditioning system within those facilities, we'll conduct those activities. If it says changing out lights and so forth. Addition to that, we'll be training persons within those buildings so that they can become more aware of energy efficiency, which is not only going to impact on the operation within the building, but this information can actually be used within the homes as well to improve energy use within the homes. As part of that project as well, too, we are hoping to have set up a framework which looks at the potential of reusing some of that savings towards future projects. As we try to make the transition to increasing renewable energy on the island, it is critical that we have capacity building, that we have persons on the ground capable of doing, achieving, or helping us to achieve this transition. Hence, we are working along with BNTF on a project which is aimed at training and certifying 12 persons in the installation of solar PV in terms of also the maintenance and also in terms of the inspection. What that will do is that we will have sufficient number of persons on the island capable of installing solar PV, and it will help to move the industry or the sector forward. Addition to that, we are also looking at improving the resilience of health centers as part of that project. We will be doing the St. John's Dental Center, the St. Peter's Health Center, and the CLM Health Center. Those two health centers, the CLM and St. Peter's, would be powered 100% by renewable energy. This helps in terms of increasing the resilience of those centers, so that instead of having, when there's a power outage, those centers should still be available for the public in case of any emergency. And that also will be a part of the practical training for persons who are involved in this training course, right? Additionally as well, too, we are working along with the OECS to fund the implementation of another solar system at the St. John's Health Center, geared at providing roughly 20-25% of the energy requirement for that location. Added to the solar PV system, we are also looking to put in a car charging port. And the reason for this as well is that we recognize that there is some level of hesitance from persons as it relates to going towards electric vehicles. And as a department, we are looking at, what are some of the barriers that is stopping persons from going that direction, and we recognize maybe the infrastructure is one such. So we are also looking to put in a charging port at the health center as we try to roll out infrastructure to support the development of, well, the expansion in relation to electric vehicles on the island. We had the visit of a consultant last week as it relates to the maintenance of the geothermal well, some prized assets that we have, and it's critical that we maintain these assets for future use. So what we had was an initial site visit. There's a contract already awarded to JRG Energy out of New Zealand, and they were here earlier, well, last Wednesday to Friday, looking and inspecting the wells and just to have an idea of what is required for maintaining those wells. They will be returning between the 10th to the 20th of December to actually conduct those maintenance activities. And again, as I indicated earlier, capacity building is critical. And what we have also included in that particular scope of work is for persons locally to be trained so that future maintenance work can be handled by local personnel. And lastly, we are working on trying to bring a surface plant to Montserrat. I think this is something that has been in the works for a very long time. We have taken the decision to issue an invitation for tender that was issued on the 8th of November. This particular document is aiming to procure an entity that will invest, well, basically finance, build, own, operate, and then transfer after a period of time a surface plant based on the wells that we currently have. And then the power that is generated from this surface plant will be sold to MCWLE through a power purchasing agreement. We have also secured the support of Connex Support Unit, which is a GIZ, which is basically funding from the Germans, to assist with the development of the PPA, because this is where it becomes critical. It's important to have a PPA that guides the interaction between the utility and the new entity. So we see this as a critical step, so we are making sure that we cover all the necessary bases. What we're going to do today, as a continuation of the effort to achieve this goal, is to have a panel discussion which is centered around looking at the future of energy on the island. And there are diverse ways that we can achieve this goal. But I think it's important to have discussion and discourse that allow for optimum solutions to be derived. And what we have done today, we have invited persons within the ICT sector, persons within the energy sector, the utility, to be a part of this process and a part of this discussion. Today we have 5 gentlemen who has actually answered this call, and we're going to have a discourse about energy and ICT and how we improve them in the future. So today we have Mr. Graham Ryan. I'll let him introduce himself a bit later on. Mr. Peter White and Mr. Bertram Lee, who's going to give their opinion as it relates to energy. And then we have Mr. Jovan Daniel and Mr. Alfred Poisier, who's going to give their opinion as it relates to ICT. What we're going to have is just an open discussion. I will chair and give just a little background information in terms of the discussion, and then the persons with a skill set in the different areas will flesh out as we go along. What I'm going to ask is for each individual just to give an introduction of themselves and just a little background of their work activities, and just maybe a brief introduction of what you would like to see within your respective area. So I will start with Mr. Ryan. You can go ahead, please.
Hi, good morning. Graham Ryan. I'm the director of the Montserrat Volcano Observatory. That as relates to geothermal energy, I do research in that area and also practical work. So I've been involved in the project here since about 2008, 2009. So I did geothermal exploration to kind of define the system, and have ongoing research projects to better understand the system and its capacity and how to exploit it. So that's kind of where my expertise lies.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Mr. White.
Good morning, everyone. For some who don't know me, that might be difficult. I'm an engineer in background. I'm an electrical engineer. And I served years with the originally electrical division of PWD. I also served as an engineer with the former utility that operated the electricity department, MCWLE. And just recently, well, my last connection basically was as general manager for the combined utility of the former water authority and MCWLE. And they were merged to become what is now known as MCWLE, Montserrat Utilities Limited. And my role in the private sector would be, I've done a bit of how should I put it? I've done a bit of electrical wiring, if you want to call it that, over the years. So now, most people, however, know me, unfortunately, or fortunately, as the case might be, as a former teacher. And I think all of that experience has given me a perspective on development for Montserrat, both from practical engineering standpoint and from education development standpoint. I think I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. White. Mr. Lee.
Yeah, good morning to everyone. I am Bertram Lee. My background also is in electrical engineering. I've also worked with the government, but this at the airport as the electrical engineer there. And then I moved on from there to cable and wireless. For another 17 years, I worked there as the electrical engineering department. Then now I'm in the private sector, basically as an electrical contractor, basically doing PV systems, electrical work, building construction, and that kind of thing. So here am I.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. Mr. Daniel.
Good morning. Morning, I'm Jovan Daniel. I'm an IT professional, and I'm in the field of computer science, and I'm also a very big computer technology enthusiast. I've worked as a part of government teaching for 2 years, taught at the secondary school. I've actually taught privately, IT, for 4 years, and I currently work as the Senior Systems Administrator at the Montserrat Customs and Revenue Service. I'm there, I'm in charge of IT project management. I do some application development, web development, and some technician work, whatever IT work the department needs. I also work in the private sector as a part of a local computer technology company, Fourth Dimension, where we also do similar work, web development, application development, virtual reality, varied work. That's me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daniel. Mr. Poyser.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Alfred Poyser, an educator at Montserrat Secondary School. Also studied cybersecurity at the University of Liverpool.
Thank you very much. So what we're going to do is, as I said, we have two sets of panelists, energy-related and ICT. I have prepared a few questions just to guide the engagement. At any point in time, I will, anyone can actually choose to respond, even if you're not energy-related, you can still respond and chime in as you think is, your opinion in relation to how we should go forward as it relates to energy. Currently on the island, roughly 99.6% of our energy that is consumed on the island is imported fossil fuel, right? Just roughly 4% of it was, in 2021 was from the solar installations that we currently have. And transportation sector accounts for roughly 48% of that fossil fuel that we import, right? While electricity accounts for 45% and 7% for LPG consumption. In your opinion, what strategies can be implemented to achieve a significant reduction in the level of consumption in the transportation sector? And this sector, I think, is one of the hardest sectors to improve in terms of efficiency. But what do you think are some of the recommendations or some of the strategies government can implement to help to improve efficiency within the transportation sector? Any panelists will try to give it a shot? We have seen tax exemption given for hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles. And is there any further steps that is required, in your opinion, to take things further for the transportation sector? I see, Mr. Ryan, you want to make a...
Yeah. Well, so I'm not an economics expert at all, so it's really more just a conversation. So obviously in terms of, I think if the electrical vehicles are economically attractive and practical for Montserrat, then I think, slowly, as people change their vehicles and so on, they'll be interested in doing that. So I think it's just kind of raising the profile and publicizing, what is the economics of this thing? Does it make economic sense? How does it actually compare in terms of your running costs, in terms of the full running cost for an electrical vehicle compared to a fossil fuel vehicle, so that people have the information and then they will vote with their wallets. But like I say, I guess a question for you, obviously, if we go completely to electrical vehicles, according to this, we would have to have our electrical supply would have to go up 100%. And so, where are we at the moment, and where would we need to go in terms of our kind of power supply?
So from an energy overall standpoint, we have to say we're just at 4%. If you're looking at electric generation, we're just under 2.something% in terms of what we overall generation from a renewable energy source. And in terms of answering your questions, one, yes, I do agree, a greater publicity in terms of the benefits of electric vehicles. We've made attempts of doing that, looking at the cost for importation, looking at some of the savings that you can achieve compared with hybrid as opposed to electric, and so forth. But I think maybe we need to do a bit more of that. I mean, you can't have enough publicizing, so we will continue to do so. I think what I recognize, there is some hesitancy in persons as it relates to the technology, and that's an issue that you'll have in terms of whether or not there is sufficient persons on island to maintain those vehicles. What happens if there's a fire? You know, these different things, the disposal of the batteries after the. So these are some of the conversations that we will continue to have with persons and try to alleviate some of the worries, because truth be told, this is the direction that the world is going. And there is a reason why we are pushing that agenda. If we want to achieve 100% energy transition, it means that whatever we are powering our transportation sector by needs to be indigenously found. And that's why we are looking at electricity. So therefore, we can use whether it's wind, whether it's solar, whether it's geothermal to provide that electrical power.
Yeah, so I guess you can do some promotion now. Like, kind of, how do the costs compare?
Right. So, and this is funny. With the removal of the consumption and duty on electric vehicle, the cost landed for an electric vehicle is lower than what you will pay for an internal combustion engine. It is low. And then you have lower operational costs, lower maintenance costs. So it's a lot more cost effective. But I think there is some hesitancy still in that regard. We have seen an upsurge and an uptick in persons going towards the hybrid because that's an easier transition because you still have an engine in it. And that itself is proven to be relatively successful, but we still would like to see a greater uptake. What we want to see is that most of the importation of vehicles moving towards hybrid vehicles, and we are not seeing that at this stage as yet. Yeah.
It's good to hear that the cost, the operation costs, etc., even the landing cost is good, or should I say it's I shouldn't say affordable, because neither one is affordable in the sense for most of us. And that's, I think, is part of the problem, because in order for us to move with the transportation sector, in essence, we're talking about replacing the vehicles that are currently on island and operating. Most of the vehicles are used vehicles, which means that the cost, initial cost, is much lower than bringing in an electric vehicle. But the thing is, why would I, at this point in time, just abandon my vehicle that I have now to purchase an electric vehicle? And this presents a difficulty for the transportation sector. And one of the things I think can be done, and should be done, in fact, is for more, what would you call it, public or maybe perhaps semi-public, private, whatever, transportation system which does not require the use of a personal vehicle. I think that's something which could be introduced or make more, probably more viable, using electric vehicles that can make it difficult for someone to say, I really, really need a car. Because right now, everybody seems to feel, in order to get to where they want to get, when they want to get there, is that they must have their own vehicle. If you provide a public transportation system, I won't go into whether it should be government-owned or privately owned or whatever it is, but if you have a public transportation system which allows people to go from A to B at a relatively low cost and not have to rely on the current situation for the public transportation is you go out on the side of the road and you wait for a couple of hours for somebody to pass, right? You cannot make appointments or whatever. If something comes up and you have to get from Salem to Braids, you have to call a taxi or something of that nature.
So,
if you were to provide a public transportation system which will allow people to be able to get around without having the need or the urge to get a private vehicle, that I think is a start in terms of replacing what is currently available. Granted, of course, the possible extinction of the gasoline supply might in fact make it a little more urgent.
Right. All right, so thanks a lot for the input. And I just want to add a few things. Two, I agree with you in terms of if I have a vehicle at this point, I'm not going to dispose of it. And that's why we are targeting persons who are looking to import vehicles. So what we'd like to see, 100% are electric vehicles. That's what we first like. And you hit the nail on the head there. The critical thing is to improve our mass public transport, make it a lot more efficient. One of the ideas that we are sort of toying with, or something that I've put forward to consideration, is the whole idea of a pilot project where we purchase, let's say, 3 18-seater electric buses. And I don't believe in the government getting into the business of public transport. It should be a private entity that does that. What I'm proposing is that now through a lottery system, that these buses be awarded on a lease basis to persons who are already in the transportation system. So not to award to new persons, but persons so that they themselves, can be a part of the process. Added to that, and the critical component, and this is where we're having this conversation, is the ICT component of developing apps that allows for the driver to see where potential passengers are, and for passengers to have an idea in real time where these buses are. That will allow for more efficiency in terms of the operation of these buses. That will allow for also persons to be have a bit more faith and trust in terms of the transportation network, to say, okay, the bus is in Salem, I give myself 5 minutes to be on the road, and I can, so it will help to improve the efficiency in the sector. And that's the direction that we need to look at. Mr. Poiser, you want to make a comment?
Yes. With 98% of our energy now coming from fossil fuel, right? Does it really make a difference to go electric when electric is just coupling up the fossil fuel in another process?
Good.
Have any research gone into other methods like natural gas, biogas, that only requires a simple conversion to the current vehicle rather than importing a new vehicle? And we would be using renewable energy without spending money to get a new startup.
That's correct. And we have considered that not only from the transportation sector, we have also looked at it from the electric sector, because yes, you have, from an economic standpoint, natural gas operation is going to be cheaper than diesel operation. However, that just delays our ability to transition to renewable energy. So what we want to do is, yes, that can help for the short term, but what we're looking at is that transition quickly. Because of the size of the grid, allowing for 100% RE is not a big leap. It can be done quickly. It can be done in a matter of less than 5 years. So it's possible. So what we need to do now is to start that transitioning than to wait later to do that transition.
But what I'm saying, with natural gas or biogas, the transition and the changeover would be simultaneous with each other, and it's cheaper. Because for the vehicles, it's just a simple conversion on the actual vehicle.
I know you have a kit that.
And then the natural gas, we have animals and people here that can generate transition.
One, I'm not sure if we have the volume, and that's the unfortunate thing, to be able to do that in a great content. But it's a possibility in relation to it. What I'd like to do, Sally, you want to make a comment?
One point. I was looking at basically a phased approach in terms of sensitizing people who are in the vehicle business. Instead of bringing in fossil fuel vehicles, start bringing in PVV, more electrical vehicles. So you phase it out accordingly to your time when you expect to be 100%.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move on to another question, and this is now in terms of an ICT-based question. So back in 2009, the government of Montserrat signed a contract for the laying of undersea fiber optic cable worth roughly 17 million EC. So the project has been completed, and most homes in Montserrat now have access to fiber. It's probably one of the most connected islands in the region as it relates to fiber to the home. Now, the question is now, how do we maximize that infrastructure? Right? So in your opinion, how can we maximize the benefit of the technology? So that's the first part of the question. And I'll let persons answer that, and I'll just dive a bit deeper into it after.
Maximizing benefit from our fiber cable that gets us connected, not only to our regional neighbors, but to the world, is a holistic approach. Means government, private sector, entrepreneurs have to buy into this maximization. Having high-speed internet with nothing to do with it makes no sense. Can I stay at home and order a meal? Can I book a flight from home? What can I do with it? Can I register for a driver's license? So everybody, all stakeholders need to put in their effort so that this can be maximized. Government need to make sure that government can be accessed through what they spend $17 million for. Private sectors need to be encouraged to put platforms in place so that the internet can be utilized by citizens to do private businesses. Jobs, there's so many jobs that can be facilitated through this. But it's a holistic approach where everybody has, it takes forums like these where people come together and plan, how can we move forward using this, rather than have it sitting there only to watch TV or to make a phone call.
So Daniel, you?
Yeah, and completely agreed. And to add to that, I think one important thing that we really need to do is to really see how this increased bandwidth and reliability and speed in our networks can really benefit other sectors. So not to really think about it as ICT isolated, but how can it impact our agriculture sector? How can it impact the transportation sector, as we were talking about just now, in terms of like building applications or things like robotics and different things that can augment how we access and how we use these processes. Another important thing I think as well, which was mentioned, is the creation of businesses. I know in the past, personally with my business, there were difficult times where we're trying to work on projects that take hours and days to work on, and sometimes we lose a whole day because we don't have internet, or internet is very slow, and we can't do things like download large files and that sort of stuff. And I think with this increase, with this better infrastructure, it's easier and it's more feasible now to really start up ICT businesses, computer science businesses, especially for younger persons who want to get into that field. I think that that barrier, maybe not completely removed, but is down a bit more now. So I think that's good.
All right. So what I'll do, I'll ask both of you a question. So to the ordinary persons who have higher speed in their homes, which are probably going to be used for Netflix and other streaming things, what, in your opinion, that they can do, for the ordinary person, what they can do with that increased speed to enable them to have additional revenue within their home? Just some ideas, some possible solutions that they can put forward in relation to that.
Well, for the normal person to be able to generate revenue This era is the era of the entrepreneur. Back in the days, you go into school, what do you want to be? I want to work for John Brown. I want to work for Montserrat Bank. Today's kids, I want to be I want to be a this. I want to develop this. Now, high-speed internet is the fastest way to become an entrepreneur from home. The business sector of the world today is done from home. No longer are people renting an office just to get a telephone and a desk. Businesses are done from home. So with high-speed internet, whatever it is that I am interested in developing or putting forward financially to the world, I can utilize the high-speed internet to advertise my business, to reach out to clients. I can discuss with clients in China while I'm here in Montserrat. But it all starts from education, from our schools. We're still in an era where rather than promote responsible use, we seek ways of banning total use. Technology cannot just be something that we use with permission. We need to promote responsible use from childhood so that children grow up with technology, grow up learning to use responsible what is accepted and what is not accepted. We learned, or we should have learned from COVID-19, what happens when we ban use rather than promote responsible use. Countries that were banning use of technology and devices in schools were left behind in COVID-19 because our kids, our children, took a year and a half just to learn how to navigate the platforms and how to interact with each other and their teachers. Responsible use taught from school is very important in order to get people comfortable using technology so that technology becomes a third hand and it is used normally in businesses.
Very well said. There's not too much to add to that. I think another thing that can be looked at, and it mentions homeowners specifically in this question. So what came to my mind was smart home infrastructure, where, you know, it's a bit of a controversial topic right now, but still something that can be useful, smart homes. And I think the business aspect of it, and starting your own business, in looking into business opportunities, the access to information, especially with reliable internet, is great. It's amazing what we can find on the internet, where you can learn, what skills you can learn. I think that really is the greatest asset that this improved network can give us in terms of having a reliable way to sit down, whether we pursue further education formally or look at courses to learn skills. I think that's really the biggest benefit to homeowners.
Thanks a lot. So we're going to switch again to an energy-related question. So we have highlighted before the importance of the transition. I mean, it's critical for us as a small island to have energy security, and we need to basically have all hands on deck. Thus far, this transition has been led by the government. There hasn't been much input from the private sector, or even having the ability for residents to really make that impact. So the question I'm asking here, would the implementation of a feed-in tariff, a feed-in tariff is essentially where homeowners are able to install solar PV system on their homes, and the utility will have an arrangement with that homeowner in relation to that installation. Would this be a viable way of helping to increase the renewable energy penetration locally? And additionally, what are some of the negative impact that this potential opportunity towards improving the penetration of RE on the island, what can happen in relation to it?
I think, first of all, that's one of those gotcha questions, because bottom line is everybody would like to be able to say, well, okay, I generate my own electricity, I don't have to pay the grid. The problem here is, number one, you have to have the capital to do it in the first instance. And secondly, when you do that, you reduce the overall consumption from the utility. And the utility depends on the consumers and the consumption of their product in order to maintain their system. And if you reduce the need for everybody to burn whatever it is they used to burn just in order to maintain and operate your system, you now have to charge a tariff, which for those who can't afford to put in a system, to pay. Because somehow somebody has to pay for the operation and maintenance of the system. So it sounds good when you say, well, okay, let me put in a solar system and I can sell to the utility what I don't use, and I don't have to pay for what I use. But the bottom line is, when you do that, you affect those other customers who cannot afford to do that. The other issue there, though, is a distributed generation system on the surface sounds great, but it also introduces additional problems for the grid. We have a very small grid which can't take too many unexpected interventions. I'm talking about where somebody on our grid, for instance, if somebody decided they were going to do some welding, and they're in a section, they're in some place, well, maybe where I live in Basis, and I put on my welder, and it means that suddenly I carry up the load. If the system isn't robust enough to take care of that sudden change in load demand, this system crashes, which is part of one of the problems we have, I would say, currently. And this is one of the things we've got to, and I'm not saying that it shouldn't be done. I'm saying, basically, we have to upgrade our small system so that the small system can afford to take that sort of unexpected load and still function properly. And of course, at a low cost. And you can't do that with, I shouldn't say you can't, but our thrust for geothermal energy would assist in allowing us to be able to be more resilient when it comes to these little things.
Okay. So I'd like Mr. Lee to chime in on this because, as I say, this is a line of work that you see as a future business for yourself. And after you've chimed in, I'll take a little stab at the question itself.
Yeah, I think it has to do with collaboration within the utility and the private sector. Because what I'm saying here is that from what Mr. White is saying, all right, I could understand what he's saying, but then from the private sector who is trying to build their own capacity, well, I think because the government gives some concession, then instead of them paying back into MCWLE, or MCWLE paying them for their excessive, what they do would give MCWLE that excessive, which they can, in turn, help other folks.
Well, let me add to that. Not just help other folks. What it does is it gives more extra capacity to encourage other businesses.
Right.
But the problem that we have is our small private sector. And if we encourage the development of other businesses, which this would allow, because you now have the additional power that you can provide for them, whatever project might be there. That's helpful. So in the bigger picture, it's a good thing in that sense, but it's also very risky.
All right, so Mr. Poye, you want to make a comment, and then I'm just going to...
So this actually should reduce costs for everybody else. I've seen it done in two ways. In the Turks and Caicos Islands, what the power company does is rent space on your rooftop to put their solar panels. You get it cheaper, and it's cheaper for everybody else. There is also a method where, so that is where it is owned by the utility company. There's a method where it is owned by the private entity, private person, and they generate energy. Whatever the excess is sold back at a fixed cost to the energy provider, which then now has energy cheaper to sell back. Now, in order for this to be beneficial to all, proper regulations must be put in place. So this is where government has to play their role in this. So government is playing their role, the private entities playing their role, MCWLE will be playing their role. The regulation must be there to ensure that everybody does what they are contracted or agreed to do. And it can work.
If I can just interject a second.
I think I agree with that. I'm not disagree. I would never disagree with that. But you must also take into account the fact that we must also upgrade our grid so that our grid can deal with the issues that will develop. Not just regulatory, but
technical.
Yes.
And remember, any addition to the grid must be controlled by MCWLE. So I, as a private entity, cannot just go and say, I'm going to put on solar panel.
So just to slip in, I mean, that's what our feed-in tariff system is about. It will come with a policy in terms of what are the requirements for interconnecting, what are the utilities going to pay to the individual. So all that in terms of the technical and also in terms of the financial side is dealt with. Now, it is possible, and it is possible to an extent. What is required, and it's been done in many Caribbean islands, a decision can be taken that our peak is what, 2.3 megawatt roughly? Yeah. A limit can be set, and the system size, the maximum system size that you allow. So we can say we're going to just allow 10% of the grid to be distributed generation system. We're going to allow individual a maximum size of X value. And we're going to do it where it doesn't have to be a case, because it would be difficult for MCWLE to do a case where you do your home and then you're just selling the excess. You can do it where MCWLE is taking the entire production from the individual, buy to the particular rate, and the individual is buying. So do a net billing system and not a net metering system, right? That itself will allow for the utility to benefit. It will allow for the individual to benefit. Unfortunately, the only loser in this is going to be Delta. So you do it where it is based on that fuel surcharge component. You work it within that margin so that the utility will still be functional and there is no significant loss. Additionally, what I will say as well too, from a technical standpoint, I would also recommend that customers use a hybrid inverter, which allow for them to include battery storage as well too, so that it doesn't create that significant impact on the grid. And once you formulate within that, there's a possibility for allowing it, even if the decision is just 5%. But I think at the moment, there's no clear direction or no clear information on what is required. And because of that, you're leaving a situation for a wild, wild west, So I think what needs to happen, there should be a policy. There must be something that clearly says, okay, if you want to, this is what you're allowed, this is what size you're allowed, and what really pertains, because I recognize that there isn't clarity even in documentation of how this is supposed to move forward.
I think you include the ICT portion of that, where you're on top of it, all the data, and you must have the IT infrastructure as well.
Yeah, and then for this to work, then MCWLE must be the manager per se for everybody's private solar system. So they must pass through MOL, and MOL literally manages it, what you produce and what you use.
Correct. All right, correct. So we're gonna go to another question quickly. This now is an ICT-related question. We all know in terms of crypto mining data centers, and we also have the call centers which are popping up across the region as a possible way of increasing business activities in the different islands. And these centers are contributing significantly to the revenue of some of these islands. So the question is, I'll ask, what is the benefits of these centers that they can bring to Montserrat? And are these centers a viable option locally? And what sort of upskilling will be required locally to help us to take advantage of such centers?
Well, I would say the crypto mining data centers and the call centers, they're two very different cases. In terms of the crypto mining centers, how it works is that your computer or group of computers, they would do calculations that help solve ledger problems and that sort of stuff in the crypto space, basically allowing the crypto, like Bitcoin and those systems to work. And then for that use of your graphics processing power, for the use of your computer, you're rewarded some currency, Bitcoin, etc., etc. Most times what happens is as this process goes along, as time goes along, the returns aren't as high, so it's diminishing returns. And I think the largest consideration that you have to think about is the power it takes to run your computers to actually do those calculations. And if you're getting less rewards over time, then it's diminishing returns there. So in terms of benefits and viability, especially to Montserrat, and I know we complain a lot about our high energy costs. That's just how it is. I'm not sure how I would say the benefits or the viability. I would tend, personally, I might stay away from that. Of course, if we're talking about using renewable energies, and if you manage to have your computers or group of computers running for very, very little cost, then you don't really have much to lose there. In terms of call centers, I think that there's much benefits to be had, especially with now that you mentioned we have improved networking capabilities, we have more uptime, we have more reliable services. I think it really presents an opportunity, especially if we're solving things like unemployment and we want more opportunities. Even when we're talking about upskilling our local IT professionals or persons who want to get into IT, having companies come down or even creating our own companies, I think that presents a big opportunity, not only for getting jobs, but for upskilling.
Thank you.
Okay, and also as it relates to call centers, as a newcomer in the call center business, the call center introduction also helps us to develop policies, because call centers are coming with already developed policies that they've been working from. So other sectors can pull from what the call centers are using to develop other policies that we need. So it's a win-win throughout.
In terms of the call centers, what sort of upskilling do you think is required locally to be able to attract call centers?
Call centers require little upskilling. They require humans because it's quick to learn. It's not technical IT. It's just device use and customer service. So there's little ICT. It's just the human bodies that are willing and able to participate.
Okay. I'm going to switch again. Oh,
I'll just say, I guess it depends on to what degree the call centers are moving here, because if it's just the customer service part and, someone answering the phone, someone dealing with queries, not much upskilling. But if it is that they're moving data centers here and that sort of stuff, then we would benefit from having, network administrators, persons who can deal with databases, technicians and that sort of stuff. So I guess it would depend on the degree to which they're moving, if they're moving physical infrastructure, networking infrastructure, that sort of thing.
Okay. And just in your opinion, in the infrastructure that we have from the fiber optics, it's prime for such an activity.
And as my colleague said, for data centers, and we have network administrators and stuff here. Again, we could use the way of China, where if you want to develop in China, a Chinese has to understudy you. So whenever we bring in specialists, it is prudent to have a local understudy the specialist. So if the specialist is here for 10 years, after 10 years, we shouldn't need to bring in another specialist.
All right, thank you.
Okay, just to, I guess, ask a supplemental question on the data center. Do you think that in Montserrat we could be competitive in that space in terms of, I mean, our energy costs, our kind of natural hazard risks, etc., and so forth?
Looking at the size, human resource on Montserrat. But when we consider why do Montserratians leave Montserrat, the reverse will bring them right back here, because now opportunities are here. So more Montserratians will stay, more Montserratians will come, more Caribbean people will come. So they will come.
The unfortunate thing is that you come with a chicken and egg situation, right? You put in whatever you need to put in, and you attract people, keep people here, fine. But in order for you to implement some of these things, you need the people here already, right? To get them to come, and the ones who are here, you have to prepare them to be able to take on this. Now, I take it that from your perspective, one of the things you must do is education and training locally, and that will help, right? But one of the things that you need to be able to do is to convince the folks out there, many who would like to come home, and they will be coming already ready and prepared to do the things which are necessary in order for the development process. But the infrastructure is not in place. The things which they desire with respect, not just in terms of our ICT or energy, but other infrastructure must also be in place in order for you to be able to do that. And the curious thing about what we are saying here today, to me, is that energy and ICT is fundamental to just about any kind of business or service or operation that anybody wants to develop in today's world. And if you don't have the infrastructure that makes it possible for them to say, okay, I can come and do this, right? It's a waste of time.
Yep. So I just want to jump in, and you've just resonated the theme there, and that's what we're talking about, energy and ICT, really trying to develop the future of Montserrat. In the interest of time, because we're kind of short for time, right? So there's just one more question, unfortunately, which I want to ask in relation to energy. On the 8th of November, we basically would have issued an invitation for tender for the construction of a geothermal surface plant. And with that prospect, there's a prospect of having a second entity within the electrical sector. Now, the first question I'll ask is how would this development impact ratepayers in terms of persons on the island? Because that's the first question that people will want to be answered in terms of, is it going to be beneficial for ratepayers? And the second question is, can the electric sector accommodate two entities? Those are the two questions I have in relation to that.
Okay, well, I think you probably have the answers, but so yeah, I mean, like from the presentation that you gave earlier, it's kind of like not two competing entities that you're talking about. It's a more of a cooperative
Complementing, yeah.
kind of venture where you have one person who's producing steam and energy and then selling it to MCWLE, who will then kind of retail it. So I mean, it all comes down to like kind of how that agreement is going to be structured and what the economics of that agreement are, and that's going to be, I guess, what we're going to find out.
Yeah, that's true. Because I'm really looking at the what the cost factor would be based on the two entities, because you realize with both the two utility companies, Digicel and Flow, they're basically losing in the market, right? They're losing in the markets for another entity to come in within Montserrat as a utility company. There would be loss on both sides because of you're looking at your population, and you don't have the population growth to service these two entities. So there would be a lot of loss there.
Mr. White?
I don't see necessarily that there's a competition, given the fact that I think what you're saying is that this whatever entity is going to be on the generation side, and MUL doesn't necessarily have to continue. Well, we hope they don't need to continue their current operations with fossil fuels. Of course, it's nice to have the backup just in case something happens. One never knows. But the unfortunate thing for me is that if it is even possible to get an investor, given our situation, to come in, to do what we're doing, if it's possible, and I'm trying my best to be optimistic in this, and I'm finding it very difficult because of all the risk factors involved in, let us say, the situation where we have an active volcano and you can't get insurance. How does an entity now prepare and come here with those risk factors and, of course, the requirements to get a return on the investment? And when you start talking in those terms, then you start to ask yourself the question, our consumer base at this point in time can give them what is required for them to say, yes, it's worth it for me to come, and worth it to put in whatever it is. Like I said, I'm optimistic. Right. But I would prefer to hear that something was done. The very terms of the request for the tender, it sounds good. The only problem with me and what it says is that we're asking somebody out there to expend whatever it is required to put together a proposal without knowing that they're going to be able to be successful, right? And with all the risks involved with coming to a small entity like Montserrat and a small consumer base and the risk, hazard risk, and all of that. I don't want to put damper on it, and I would love to see somebody come in and say, okay, well, we'll do this for you and bring the cost for electricity to our consumers down to a nice, comfortable level, but I don't see it. Okay. And I'm sorry, I don't like...
No, that's fine. So I'll just jump in for a second here, and I think it's important. I mean, these things are dependent on the market, and the market will decide. I mean, what you're saying is in terms of your speculation. But I think at the end of the day, it's really up to the investors to see what is on the ground and make a decision on that. What I'll also say as well, too, when investors make an investment, they're not just looking at the current situation. They are looking at the potential for future additional development. And I think, Mr. Ryan, you suggest that the resources here is upwards of 60 megawatt potentially. So sometimes, yes, your initial, there are a lot of companies that do what you call, the initial entry is a loss leader. You may do the investment where it's not providing you the level of return that you expect, but you have a consideration for the future. And what we have done in terms of the structure of the ITT, we have done it in such a way where we're not just asking for the generation of electricity, but we're also looking at the potential for those investors to set up businesses that uses the excess energy. And that's what we're looking at. So we are looking at this as an opportunity for growth and not just energy production. And I think that's where the caveat is that can help to kind of alleviate some of the concerns that you have actually highlighted, and may be more attractive than it may seem. Thus far, we have received significant feedback from persons who are going through the process and seem willing to move forward. But your concerns are quite noted, and I think naturally these are some of the things that they themselves would have also considered before making a decision. And I think come next April, we'll have a better understanding, because that's the deadline for submission of those documents, and we will have a better understanding of the direction that we are going. Unfortunately, we are out of time. It was a very good discussion. I'm sure persons would have a better understanding of what is happening in terms of energy, what is happening in terms of ICT, and have an idea of the direction that we are trying to take the country. I want to thank each and everyone for participating. Your input was valued. And we do look forward to each of us working together, because your information will also help the ministry in terms of how we move forward. And we as a ministry want to work closely with not only the panelists, but the community at large in developing ideas and strategies that will move forward both sectors. Thanks again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll now hand over to Xiaoshu.
All right, thank you very much to the panelists. So for now, what we do before we go straight into our prize-giving ceremony, we just have a very short synopsis of our ICT and Energy Month 2022. Our calendar of events began on the 1st of November, where we had our official opening live on ZGB Radio. We had an official joint speech by the Minister of Communication, Works, Labor and Energy, Dr. the Honorable Samuel Joseph. He would have basically given insight to all things energy and ICT-wise here on Montserrat, our future going forward, some of the things to expect, and our list of activities and events. We had our energy radio quizzes daily every Saturday. We had our ICT quizzes, our radio quizzes, every Monday, where it was open to all the public. We had questions for the children and the adults for everyone to win prizes. Those winners would be announced at a later date for them to come and collect their various prizes. Going down further down the list, we had the Energy Church service, the Sunday of that same first week for the month. Then we had scheduled for the following week, we had our primary school visits. Energy would have went into the primary schools and the secondary schools, where they would have demonstrated various energy kits and talked about various energy assets that are here on Montserrat for all to know. We also had planned as well our secondary tech hunt. These two events put on by the ICT unit were unfortunately had to be postponed, and they would be facilitated in the schools at a later date coming at the end of the year. We're looking to have these as an end of the year school activity just for the children to do. So we'll still be going into the schools, still going to be into the primary schools and the secondary schools to host these events. Our big event that we had was our Tech Steps campaign. This campaign is still ongoing, and it will be ending at the end of the month. But we had our obstacle run, and this was a very big joint event that we had. It was joint between ICT and Energy, and it saw the entirety of the ministry taking part, everyone coming out, everyone being active. There was a big obstacle course set out. Everyone came out, they participated, and they had won lots of get some prizes, as you see behind me here. This event was sponsored by Digicel, a lot of sponsors, Digicel, Sarah, Flo. We also had, Karishma as well. So we had a lot of sponsors for that event. The energy department as well had their asset tour. I believe this tour was with the grade 6 and the Form 4 students of the MSS, where they were taken on tours of the various energy assets that are here on Montserrat, and they were told all about them, right? So this, like we said today, is our big closing as a result of the entirety of the month. We just have our closing today. You would have heard our panel discussion from our panelists, from our chairman, Mr. Kenrick Burke, and we'd like to thank everyone who is currently sitting here right now listening to us. So from this, we just go straight into our prize giving ceremonies. We have our prizes currently present for our first and our second place winners as a result of our obstacle run. And each of these two groups have a representative each, so we'll go straight into that. So for first place, we had our team from Airport placing first, and we have their representative here with us today. They would have won themselves, sponsored from Digicel, a Wi-Fi extender. For each group had 5 participants, so each participant would win this. They won themselves a Wi-Fi extender by Digicel, $50 from Sarah, hats from the stationery office, and 1 month free gift voucher from Complex Gym. Right. So you will just pose for a few pictures from Marissa, and that's about it. All right, and our second place would have won. Our second place would have been a joint team. I believe this is on our second floor, our joint infrastructure, workshop, all of that, all right? And our representative for the second place is Mr. Glenroy Foster. You'd have seen him earlier when he did our word of prayer. All right, thank you very much. So now I will invite Miss Marissa Allen, who would be giving our vote of thanks.
Okay. On behalf of the Energy Department and the ICT unit, I would like to express a heartfelt thank you to everyone who helped make this year's ICT and Energy Month a success. Thank you to the chairman and the panelists for discussing the potential for future development of Montserrat's energy and ICT sectors. To those who helped plan, execute, and participated in the ministry's obstacle course, thank you for your enthusiasm and determination. Thank you to the Ministry of Health for your collaboration and support in promoting a healthier Montserrat through the use of technology. To our sponsors, Sierra, Montserrat Stationery Center, Digicel, the Stationery Office, Flo, St. Patrick's Corporate Credit Union, BBC, thank you for supporting our endeavors to educate and inspire the youth throughout the month. I would also like to thank the bus drivers and DMCA for their part in ensuring the energy field trip was safely completed, and the caterers for providing delicious snacks for the students who participated. We are also grateful to the Ministry of Education and the schools for permitting us time to discuss RE with the students. To the general public, we greatly appreciate your participation throughout the month and your support and feedback. The month of activities has been a success, and we look forward to your continued support in the future.
All All right, so that's it for today's proceeding. Once again, we would like to thank everyone who came out to listen, everyone who participated, our panelists. Thank you very, very much. You were the highlights of our evening. Our featured speaker who has already left us. We say once again thank you to Mr. Grenell Foster for our word of prayer. We say thank you to the chairman, Mr. Kenrick Burke, and Ms. Marissa Allen for our closing statements. As we would have said before, this was our first ever joint ICT and Energy Month 2022. We look forward to you with various activities and events and initiatives to come further from the MCWLE, and we look out to putting all of that out to you. And thank you once again for listening, and yeah, that's it.